America's history isn't a timeline, it's a blooper reel with better costumes. 1. The Great Emu War of Boston. That wasn't. In 1918, Boston authorities tried to control a pigeon infestation using what they called biological warfare. They imported Australian emus, hoping they'd chase pigeons away. The plan was pure genius, if your definition of genius is disaster with feathers. Within weeks, the emus escaped, trampled gardens, terrified children, and terrorized the trolley lines. Locals demanded the mayor's resignation after a police squad spent 3 days chasing birds through downtown like a live-action cartoon. When they finally caught them, Boston quietly banned exotic bird solutions forever. So next time you hear someone say, "It's for the birds," just know Boston took that literally and paid for it in public humiliation. 2. The explosion that gave Texas a bath. In 1937, a small Texas town called New London accidentally blew itself into history with math. The local school had decided to save money by rerouting leftover natural gas to heat classrooms. Nobody realized natural gas is odorless until the whole building detonated like a firework factory on payday. The blast was so massive it was felt miles away. But out of that tragedy came one surprisingly practical law, adding the smell of rotten eggs to gas so humans can actually tell when their living room is about to turn into a Michael Bay scene. A horrific lesson, but at least Texas ensured the rest of us could sniff out stupidity before it explodes. 3. When Congress forgot to end a war. The War of 1812 officially ended in 1815, except in Eastport, Maine, where someone forgot to deliver the memo. The British Army kept occupying the town for 4 more years because Washington never sent a replacement flag. Locals just went along with it. They paid British taxes, drank British tea, and celebrated the 4th of July quietly so they wouldn't get scolded by redcoats. When the oversight was finally discovered in 1818, Congress held an emergency vote to officially end hostilities. Eastport residents were reportedly delighted to be American again, which might be the most polite reaction in history to learning your government literally misplaced your freedom. 4. The president who fought a volcano with prayer. In 1793, President George Washington received a strange report from the Caribbean. An island volcano was erupting, and locals believed it was divine punishment. Always the statesman, Washington decided America should help by mailing prayers. He officially sent a letter of moral support to calm the mountain's wrath. No supplies, no engineers, not even a bucket of water, just heartfelt paperwork addressed to a geological phenomenon. The volcano, unimpressed by federal stationery, erupted anyway. Newspapers later praised Washington's spiritual leadership, proving that early American crisis management was basically good vibes and wishful thinking. If that doesn't sum up our national strategy for natural disasters, paperwork first, solutions maybe later, I don't know what does. The letter still sits in archives today, a perfect monument to a time when America literally tried to reason with magma. 5. The time Congress tried to redefine the universe. In 1897, the Indiana State Legislature came this close to changing the value of pi, not by discovering new math, but by voting on it. A local amateur mathematician convinced lawmakers that 3.144159 was too complicated, and that his simpler version, roughly 3.2, would make math more practical for schools. Amazingly, the bill passed one chamber unanimously. It took an actual mathematician wandering by the Capitol, no joke, to explain that you can't amend reality by majority vote. The proposal died in the Senate, but not before Indiana nearly legislated itself into a geometry-free dimension. It remains the only recorded instance of a government trying to overrule the laws of physics with a pencil. 6. The town that accidentally declared war on itself. In 1871, the citizens of a small Kansas town named Blue Rapids got drunk during a 4th of July celebration and decided to reenact the Civil War. Someone brought cannons. Someone else forgot they were real. The result: 2 neighborhoods exchanging live artillery fire over barbecue bragging rights. By dawn, fences were destroyed, the courthouse was smoking, and one farmer swore he'd been captured by his own cousins. The town newspaper called it a spirited misunderstanding. They later passed a law banning military pageantry involving functional ordnance, which is bureaucratic for no more shooting your neighbors during parties. To this day, Blue Rapids' motto remains peaceful since 1871, which feels less like pride and more like a legally binding promise. 7. The Great Whiskey Rebellion, America's first hangover protest. In 1791, the U.S. government decided the best way to pay off war debt was to tax whiskey, the one liquid frontier farmers loved more than water. The result? America's first riot caused by sobriety. Thousands of furious distillers took up arms, shouting slogans like "Liberty and Liquor for All." Washington, in a move no one expected, personally rode out on horseback to confront them, the only sitting president to literally lead troops in the field. After weeks of bluster and drunken negotiations, the rebels surrendered, mostly because they ran out of whiskey. The irony? The government barely collected any taxes at all, spending more money on the crackdown than they ever earned. Essentially, it was the world's most expensive bar tab, paid by taxpayers to make sure no one skipped their round. 8. The gold rush town that forgot the gold. In 1850, a group of prospectors in California founded a settlement called El Dorado City. They were sure it sat on top of untapped riches. They built saloons, a jail, and even a newspaper before realizing one minor problem. They'd misread the map. The actual gold vein was 40 miles north. Too stubborn to admit defeat, they declared themselves a trading hub for future miners, which was a heroic way of saying, "We're broke, but open for business." Within 2 years, the town had more bars than residents, and eventually, everyone left, except the newspaper editor, who kept printing optimistic headlines like "Gold nearby, probably." The ruins still exist, a monument to American confidence outpacing American cartography. 9. The Time a Pig. Almost started a war in 1859, the US and Britain nearly went to war over a pig. On San Juan Island, an American farmer shot a British settler's pig for rooting in his potato patch. Both nations immediately dispatched naval fleets. That's right, 2 empires on the brink of battle because someone's bacon got personal. For 3 tense months, soldiers glared at each other across a field, waiting for orders that never came. Finally, cooler heads prevailed, and the pig war ended without a single human casualty, though one very unlucky hog became history's most unnecessary martyr. The 2 nations later agreed to share the island peacefully, so technically, the pig did achieve something: world peace via petty agriculture. 10. The doctor who prescribed radioactive water for everything. In the 1920s, before anyone fully understood radiation, a wealthy American businessman named Eben Byers became the poster child for the world's worst health trend: radioactive water. Marketed under the brand Radithor, it was sold as a miracle cure for everything from arthritis to bad moods. Byers drank 3 bottles a day, praising it as liquid sunshine. It did make him glow, just not in a good way. Within a few years, his bones literally began to crumble. Doctors described his X-rays as a light show of regret. The tragedy forced the government to finally regulate radioactive products, proving that sometimes progress requires one man's skeleton to say, maybe we shouldn't drink the stuff that kills superheroes. Byers' tomb had to be sealed in lead, making him the only man in history who needed a radiation warning on his coffin. 11. The airplane that bombed Oregon by accident. During World War II, Japan launched over 9,000 fire balloons toward the U.S. Paper bombs carried by wind. Most fizzled out harmlessly in the Pacific, except one. In 1945, a balloon actually reached Oregon and exploded in a forest, tragically killing 6 picnickers. The U.S. government immediately censored the story to prevent panic. Locals only found out after the war when Japan formally apologized. It's the only recorded time the continental U.S. was bombed by an enemy, by a weapon made of rice paper and luck. The government's official lesson? Don't investigate strange balloons. Today, a small memorial stands in Oregon's woods, proof that history sometimes sounds like the setup to a bad cartoon, except the punchline was real. 12. The town that elected a dog as mayor. In 1998, the town of Rabbit Hash, Kentucky grew tired of human politicians and decided to elect someone truly trustworthy: a dog. A black Labrador named Goofy triumphed in a landslide, mostly because the other candidates kept chasing squirrels during debates. Goofy's policies were simple: greet everyone, nap often, and bark at suspicious mail trucks. His administration was so popular that Rabbit Hash has since elected 5 more canine mayors. None have raised taxes, started wars, or given long speeches, making them statistically better leaders than most humans. visitors still come to see the official mayor's office, where the current dog mayor naps under a sign reading, "In Dogs We Trust." It's the only political dynasty that literally sits and stays. 13. The time the U.S. Army lost a nuclear bomb. In 1958, an Air Force bomber accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb near Savannah, Georgia, and they never found it. The 7,600-pound device slipped from the plane during a training mishap, landing somewhere in the swampy waters off Tybee Island. The Air Force spent months searching, but eventually gave up, assuring locals it was probably fine. To this day, the Tybee bomb remains missing, technically still armed, just hanging out under some unlucky fisherman's favorite spot. Officials call it safe unless disturbed, which is basically the world's worst safety guarantee. Somewhere out there, Georgia has its own underwater doomsday device, making it the only state that can honestly say its fishing trips are nuclear-powered adventures. 14. The explosion that invented daylight saving time, kind of. In 1916, a small munitions factory in New Jersey exploded so violently that it rattled clocks. Across the eastern seaboard, local officials blamed everything from spies to cosmic interference, but one inventive city councilman had a different idea. Time itself was the problem. He proposed moving the clocks forward an hour to avoid explosive afternoons, because obviously bombs respect schedules. The concept spread like wildfire, becoming known as daylight saving time. While historians credit European energy-saving efforts for the idea, America's version was fueled by chaos, smoke, and one guy's terrible understanding of causality. Over a century later, we still lose an hour of sleep every spring because one man decided clock management could fix explosions. Somewhere, that factory foreman is still late for work. Permanently. 15. The town that tried to outlaw death. In 1995, the small Alaskan town of Barrow faced a grim reality. The frozen ground made burials impossible for much of the year. So, in peak American fashion, they didn't fix the problem. They legislated it. The town council officially banned dying within city limits. The law stated that anyone expecting to die soon should kindly relocate before doing so. Naturally, compliance was poor. Locals joked that death had been made illegal but not enforced. The rule still exists symbolically, mostly as a tourist attraction. The moral? When life gives Americans an unsolvable problem, they don't adapt. They outlaw mortality and call it governance. Somewhere, a bureaucrat is still waiting for the Grim Reaper to pay his fine. 16. The time the White House burned down, and they just painted over it. During the War of 1812, British troops marched into Washington, D.C. and burned the White House to the ground. Instead of rebuilding from scratch, Americans took a uniquely thrifty approach. They scrubbed off the soot and painted it bright white to hide the burn marks. That's literally why it's called the White House. The interior, still half charred, was used anyway, because early American presidents were apparently part-time pyromaniacs. When visitors complained about the smoky smell, officials claimed it was the aroma of victory. It's the most on-brand solution in U.S. history. Don't fix the damage, just slap on a coat of paint and call it patriotism. 2 centuries later, we still do the same thing, only now it's with highways, budgets, and public schools. 17. The man who stole the Eiffel Tower. In America. In 1925, a con artist named Victor Lustig made headlines for selling the Eiffel Tower in Paris. But less known is that he later tried to sell it again. In the U.S., he toured small American towns with blueprints and forged letters from France, claiming the French government was outsourcing dismantling rights to the highest bidder. He almost sold the structure to a steel tycoon in Texas before someone finally asked, "Wait, how would we transport it?" Lustig escaped with a briefcase full of cash and a new legend as the man who sold the same landmark twice. America fell for it proudly, proving that in the 1920s you could scam a millionaire just by promising him a souvenir big enough to block the sun. 18. The governor who declared war on clouds. In 1899, Texas was suffering from a brutal drought, and the governor was desperate for rain, any rain. Enter a scientist named Charles Hatfield, who claimed he could make it pour using secret chemicals and scientific cloud persuasion. The governor, apparently allergic to skepticism, paid him a small fortune to perform his miracle. Hatfield set up towers, burned mysterious mixtures, and sure enough, a week later, the skies opened. Unfortunately, it didn't stop. Massive floods wiped out farms, bridges, and half a town. When the state refused to pay him, Hatfield sued, arguing that technically he did deliver rain. The court agreed he'd caused it, but couldn't determine if it was a success or an act of God. The ruling still stands as the only time Texas almost wrote a check to the weather. 19. The U.S. town that accidentally elected a dead man. In 2002, voters in Melvin, Texas went to the polls and overwhelmingly chose their new mayor, a beloved local named Tom Moore Jr. There was just one problem. Tom had died a month earlier. His name stayed on the ballot because no one bothered to remove it, and apparently the living candidates didn't inspire much confidence. When reporters asked why people voted for a corpse, one resident said, "Well, he's done a better job than the last guy." The city council held an emergency meeting to decide who would replace him and eventually appointed his widow, who joked that at least her husband finally won an argument. To this day, Melvin's election is remembered as proof that in small-town politics, death is no barrier to popularity. 20. The American town that blew itself up for ratings. In 1986, a Kansas town named Centralia was fading fast. Population dropping, businesses closing, hope evaporating. So a local TV station came up with a fun publicity stunt: blow up the whole town live on television. They called it Boomtown USA. Residents were paid small sums to evacuate while explosives leveled buildings in a grand televised finale. The problem? No one told nearby towns, who thought it was a disaster and flooded emergency lines with calls about a nuclear attack. When the smoke cleared, the ratings were great, but the town was gone, permanently erased for entertainment value. Today, Centralia's only legacy is a commemorative plaque that reads, "We went out with a bang." No truer words ever described American show business. 21. The town that accidentally invented chili dogs. In 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair was a culinary madhouse, vendors hawking everything from fried ice cream to peanut butter sandwiches. But one hot dog seller had a problem. His customers kept burning their hands on steaming sausages. In desperation, he borrowed unsold dinner rolls from the bakery next door and started sliding the hot dogs inside them. The crowd went wild. Soon, people demanded toppings, and one creative soul dumped leftover chili on top. Because this is America, and every food can be improved by reckless excess. Thus, the chili dog was born, a combination of convenience, chaos, and digestive regret. It's been fueling baseball games, road trips, and questionable life decisions ever since. Culinary historians call it innovation. The rest of us call it bravery with mustard. 22. The day the U.S. accidentally nuked itself. In 1961, a B-52 bomber broke apart over North Carolina, dropping 2 live nuclear bombs onto farmland near the town of Goldsboro. One parachute deployed, the other didn't. When investigators arrived, they found that one bomb had gone through all but one safety switch. If that final switch had failed, half the East Coast would have been vaporized by an oops. The government quietly covered it up for decades, claiming there was no danger. Meanwhile, a farmer was stuck with a radioactive crater in his field and no compensation, just a polite letter saying, "Please don't dig too deep." The bomb's still there, buried and sealed, making North Carolina the only state that can claim it technically survived a nuclear attack from itself. 23. The Statue of Liberty's drunken arrival. When France shipped the Statue of Liberty to New York in 1885, it didn't arrive in majestic glory. It came in 350 separate pieces packed in crates, like a giant IKEA project for patriots. Customs officers briefly delayed the shipment because no one could find the paperwork for one enormous woman. Then, during the assembly, a worker party featuring whiskey and zero supervision led to a small accident. Lady Liberty's torch fell and smashed part of the pier. Newspapers called it an inauspicious debut, while locals said she was just getting into the American spirit. Eventually, she was rebuilt, polished, and raised high. Proof that even the greatest symbols of freedom start out as drunken construction projects that somehow work out in the end. Humanity's brightest ideas and dumbest mistakes share one flag. Which American disaster do you secretly admire most?